Tucker Carlson invited Jasmine Crockett on live TV, expecting fireworks he could control. But when she answered his loaded question with one quiet sentence and opened a folder full of receipts, it wasn't a clash. It was a collapse, and for the first time on his own show. Tucker was left blinking in silence while the audience leaned in, listening to something real. Tucker Carlson sat a little taller in his chair that night. The American flag graphic pulsed behind him like a drumbeat, bold and theatrical. His tie was just slightly looser than usual, a cue maybe that this was going to be different. He looked straight into the camera, eyes narrow with practiced sincerity, that familiar mix of amusement and warning in his voice. "Tonight," he said, "we're doing something a little unusual. We're going to have an actual conversation." His audience knew what that meant. When Tucker said conversation, he meant spectacle. When he said unfiltered, it meant one thing: he was planning to corner someone. "Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett will join us live," he continued. "Yes, that Jasmine Crockett. The one who thinks volume equals virtue. The one who's become a viral favorite for all the wrong reasons." He smirked, letting the implication sit just long enough. "We invited her, and to her credit, she said yes. So, we'll see. Maybe she'll surprise us." That line, "maybe she'll surprise us," wasn't for his viewers, it was for him. The setup was already written in his mind. A politician with big energy and bigger opinions, a conservative host with more airtime than patience. He had done this before, dozens of times. Poke, prod, let them talk too long, then smile while they walked themselves into a headline. It worked like clockwork. And tonight, that clock was ticking. In the control room, a producer nodded silently, marking the segment's countdown. 4 minutes. Online promos were already rolling. Tonight at 8 p.m., Tucker takes on Crockett. Unfiltered, unsparing, live. The hashtags were ready. The clips would be chopped by midnight. The strategy wasn't subtle. It didn't need to be. Across the chyron, bold white letters faded in Crockett versus Carlson, a live clash of ideas. But this wasn't about ideas, not really. It was about theater, and Tucker, confident behind his desk, didn't know he'd just set the stage for something else entirely. Not a clash, a shift. Because Crockett wasn't walking into a trap. She was walking into a room full of lights with both feet planted and a sentence tucked somewhere between her silence and her spine. And when she spoke, the volume wouldn't come from her voice. It would come from the silence that followed. The email came in just before noon. Subject line, live appearance request, Tucker Carlson tonight. No emojis, no fluff. Just the plain, sharp edge of formality. Jasmine Crockett read it once, then again. She didn't blink. She didn't smile. She just tapped the screen once and handed the phone to her chief of staff. "You seeing this?" He scanned it quickly, his brow furrowed. "They're baiting you," he said, sliding the phone back. "Of course they are," she replied, already scrolling past it. But she wasn't brushing it off. She was letting it sit. Within the hour, her team was circled up in her D.C. office, coffee cooling fast on the side table, tension rising just as quick. "We don't trust the edit," said her media advisor. "He's going to cut you off, twist the angle, control the framing." Jasmine nodded. "I know." A communications aide leaned forward, whispering like the walls could hear. "They're expecting a meltdown, something they can spin into a headline. Angry black woman trope, boom, viral." The room was quiet for a moment, the weight of history pressed between syllables no one dared to say aloud. Then Jasmine leaned back in her chair, eyes steady, voice smooth. "I don't walk into traps," she said, calm as morning rain. "I walk through them." A beat. Then she stood, slow and measured, walked over to the bookshelf near the window, pulled out a plain navy folder, slid something inside, paper, maybe two. No one asked what it was, no one needed to. She placed the folder gently into her leather bag and zipped it shut like she was sealing a promise. Her assistant caught her eye. "You're really doing this?" Jasmine gave the smallest smile. "I don't duck." The room didn't argue after that, because they'd seen her in hearings, on panels, behind podiums no one expected her to own. And they knew something no producer at Fox did yet. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice to be heard. She raised the moment. And this moment, it wasn't his to control, not anymore. The air inside the studio was colder than expected, not freezing, just the kind of cold that let you know you were standing somewhere meant for performance, not comfort. Jasmine Crockett walked in like she'd been there before. Maybe not this exact space, but one just like it, where lights hang too low, tension hides behind small talk, and everything smells faintly of hairspray and caution. She wore crimson, not red, not burgundy, crimson. The kind of color that doesn't whisper, the kind that makes a statement before the person wearing it ever opens her mouth. Her curls were pulled back with quiet precision, her earrings small and sharp. No distractions, just intent. The crew noticed first. A camera op paused mid-setup. A lighting tech elbowed someone quietly. Even the makeup assistant gave the tiniest double take when Jasmine passed. She didn't try to work the room, she just let the room adjust. A producer greeted her, clipboard in hand, tone chirpy in a way that didn't quite match the tension. "We'll mic you up in 5, then a quick run-through." Jasmine nodded. "Good." Then he arrived. Tucker Carlson stepped into the studio like it was a living room he'd owned for years. Slacks perfectly creased, blazer tailored like a speech. That same smirk already curled at the corner of his mouth. Charming, if you didn't know what it was hiding. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, extending his hand. "Appreciate you being brave enough to show." The handshake was firm. His grip didn't shake her. Hers lingered one beat longer than his, just enough for him to feel it. "Appreciate the invitation," she replied. Her smile was polite, her eyes were not. As they moved to the set, the tension grew legs. Not loud, not sharp, just present. The way everyone seemed to be holding their breath a little too long. Even the boom mic dipped lower than usual. Jasmine took her seat, folded her hands. The folder, navy, clean, unread, rested on her lap. Tucker leaned back in his chair like a king about to survey his court. He was already smiling, already playing. But what he didn't know yet was this wasn't a game. At least, not one he'd set the rules for. They were live for exactly 28 seconds before Tucker took the first swing. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, eyes twinkling, "you've built a reputation for, let's say, colorful commentary." The word hung in the air like it was dipped in something sticky. He smiled as he said it. The audience couldn't see that his fingers were already shuffling his note cards, already looking for the next crack to wedge his voice into. Jasmine didn't react, didn't flinch, just nodded once, like she'd heard the song before and already knew how it ended. Tucker continued, fast, polished, question after question, stacked with hidden landmines. "Do you think shouting over people is effective? Wouldn't you say it's emotionally irresponsible to use such harsh language about your colleagues? Some say your tone alienates voters. How do you respond to that?" He never let her finish a full answer. He interrupted, not with force, but with that practiced smiling doubt. Like he was offering her a life preserver made of lead. Jasmine didn't bite. She spoke clearly, deliberately, never louder than necessary, never faster than she needed to. Her sentences had weight, and she let them land fully before moving on. When he cut her off, she paused, waited, then picked up right where she left off. She didn't meet his smirk with fire, she met it with precision, and that unnerved him, just slightly. Enough for the corner of his grin to tighten, almost imperceptibly. The audience couldn't feel it yet, but the rhythm was off. He kept poking, she kept standing, without ever leaving her seat. And that smile she gave, that slight curve of the mouth that said, "I see the game, and I'm not playing it," that was the first real shift. Because it wasn't a smile for him, it was a signal. that something was coming, that she had something in her lap more dangerous than any line he could throw. And when she was ready, it wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be devastating. It came at the 22-minute mark, the moment he'd been winding toward, layering it gently beneath smirks and semantic traps, teasing it out like a magician stalling before the final trick. Tucker Carlson leaned back in his chair, eyes twinkling with that trademark blend of smugness and faux curiosity. He shuffled a few note cards, pure theater, then glanced at Jasmine with a tilt of the head that said, "Now let's really begin." "Congresswoman," he began, stretching the word like he was offering her a compliment dipped in something sour. "There's this perception that when things don't go your way, you tend to respond emotionally." He waited, letting the phrase breathe like he'd just dropped a bomb wrapped in velvet. "You've called out racism, sexism, bias, but isn't it possible that maybe, just maybe, sometimes the reaction is bigger than the issue?" He smiled, sat back, hands folded loosely. He looked comfortable, pleased even, like a man who'd just dropped his best line of the night. The studio was quiet in the way studios always are before someone either folds or detonates. Crew leaned forward. Producers held their breath. Even the moderator didn't blink. Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She reached for her water, uncapped the bottle, took a long, measured sip. Then she set it down, folded her hands in her lap, and looked straight at Tucker. She didn't smile. She didn't rush. She just let the moment sit, like she was letting him marinate in his own setup. Then, in a voice so calm it bordered on surgical, she said, "When you're used to being the loudest voice in the room," she paused, "someone telling the truth sounds like shouting." There it was, just like that, the first real silence of the evening. It landed like a piano in a quiet room. The line didn't explode, it didn't shout, it settled. Slow, heavy, unmistakable. Tucker blinked, twice. Something flickered across his face. Not quite panic, not quite confusion. Recognition, maybe. The audience didn't react right away. Because real clarity doesn't always provoke a roar. Sometimes it just stops everything. And that's what Jasmine did. She stopped the room. Tucker tried to smirk through it, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. The charm had cracked, just a little. The moderator cleared his throat, unsure whether to step in or step back. A whisper rippled through the crew. A producer mouthed Jesus under their breath. Jasmine leaned back in her chair, not smug at all, just settled, like she'd been holding that sentence for years, and now that it had been spoken, she didn't need to say anything else. Tucker shifted in his seat, suddenly less centered. He picked up his note cards, shuffled them, looked down like the words had rearranged themselves when he wasn't watching. He opened his mouth, searching for the next pivot. But there was no pivot, not this time. Because Jasmine hadn't delivered a rebuttal, she'd delivered a diagnosis. The trap had collapsed. Not because she dodged it, but because she stood still and let him fall into it. And in the silence that followed, a new kind of tension bloomed. Not outrage, not spectacle, but awareness. Tucker's brand was built on control. But Jasmine had taken the air, and when she finally folded her hands back over that navy folder in her lap, the audience knew. She wasn't done. She was just getting started. She didn't rush it, didn't lean into the drama like it was a performance. She just reached down, unfastened the navy folder on her lap, and opened it, slow, intentional, like she had all the time in the world. Tucker glanced at it, not curious, nervous. Something shifted in his posture, so small you might have missed it. A flicker of the eyes, a brief subconscious lean away. Jasmine slid one sheet of paper out, held it gently between her fingers, raised it just enough for the camera to catch a glimpse. "This," she began, voice smooth as glass, "is a quote from your show, April 6th, 2021. She didn't look at Tucker. She didn't need to. You said, if you keep telling people they're victims, they'll eventually believe it. even if the facts say otherwise. She turned the page. Another quote, another date. And yet, 2 months later, you opened a segment claiming conservatives were being systematically silenced by tech companies. You said, and I quote, "We are watching censorship become the norm." She looked up, finally, right at him, not angry, not smug, just deliberate. "So, which is it?" she asked. "Are facts only facts when they make you feel safe?" The audience was dead still. The moderator blinked, like he wasn't sure if this was still part of the show or something else entirely. Jasmine reached back into the folder, pulled out 2 more pages, data, polling, sourced articles. She didn't wave them around. She laid them on the desk between them, quiet and neat. "You've minimized systemic racism, denied gender bias, and claimed outrage culture is killing the country," she said, voice still calm. "But every time someone challenges you with evidence, you call it emotional. Every time someone tells a truth that doesn't flatter you, it's labeled theater." Tucker opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "This isn't theater," she added. "It's just a longer attention span than you're used to." No applause, no gasp, just a stillness so complete you could hear the silence thinking. And that was the moment everyone realized. She hadn't brought a folder, she'd brought receipts. And now the bill was due. Tucker reached for a laugh, one of those tight-chested, dismissive chuckles that usually disarms a moment before it sharpens. But it came out thin, shaky. "Wow," he said, blinking a little too much. "You came prepared." He tried to smile through it, but the corners of his mouth fought back. He tapped his cards, looked down, grasped for a pivot. "Look, I think we're getting a little dramatic here. I mean, if we're quoting me now?" He was trying to reclaim the tempo, trying to reframe it as a joke. But it wasn't landing. The rhythm was gone. And everyone in the room felt it. Jasmine didn't press. She didn't say a word. She just sat there, still, calm, unblinking. And that silence, that's what did it. Because Tucker was used to control, to speed, to monologues disguised as questions and debates where he set the floorboards. But Jasmine hadn't walked on his stage. She'd built a new one under his feet, brick by steady brick, while he was too busy trying to play chess with punchlines. He tried again. "I'm just saying, maybe people don't want lectures from politicians who—" He trailed off. The audience didn't murmur this time. They just watched. They weren't laughing. They weren't leaning forward for the zinger. They were listening. Tucker shuffled his papers again. They weren't even in order. His producer said something in his earpiece, and he flinched, just slightly. Jasmine folded her hands. Not triumphant, not gloating, just grounded. She didn't need to attack, didn't need to twist the knife, because she knew what he didn't. When someone like him loses control, it doesn't take a knockout punch. It just takes a room that won't play along anymore. And in that moment, for the first time all night, Tucker Carlson wasn't conducting the conversation. He was surviving it. It didn't take long. By the time the studio lights dimmed and the closing credits rolled, the internet had already started stitching together its own version of the segment. Clips spliced, captions added, reaction videos uploaded before the West Coast even hit air. But the real moment, the one that broke through the noise, wasn't even part of the show. It was a leaked backstage clip. Grainy, a little shaky. Someone from the crew, probably, who knew it was too good not to share. It showed Tucker still at the desk, mic off but still wired. He looked stunned, not angry, not performative, just lost. He turned to someone off camera, rubbing his forehead. Did that just happen? The room didn't answer. That clip hit Twitter before midnight. Within an hour, it had over 1 million views. The quote trended. So did the clip. So did Jasmine. By morning, the hashtags were everywhere. Crockett clapped back. Truth over volume? When silence speaks. Memes exploded. One showed Tucker in black and white, staring into space with, "Did that just happen?" scrawled across the bottom like a movie poster. Another was just Jasmine sipping water, with the caption, "Hydrate, dominate, exit silently." But the real reaction wasn't in the jokes. It was in the think pieces, the essays, the sudden sweeping conversation about what it means when certain voices are called emotional and others get to be passionate. Academics weighed in, so did celebrities, so did teenagers with nothing more than a ring light and a TikTok account. Jasmine Crockett just redefined what it looks like to win a debate, one user posted. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the stakes. And while the internet burned with takes and reposts and praise, Jasmine said nothing. No press tour, no victory lap, no retweets, just one tweet, posted 14 hours after the broadcast. White background, black text, no hashtags, no taglines. Truth doesn't need volume, it needs space. No replies, no follow-up. She logged off and let the silence speak for her again. It was a Friday morning in South Dallas. Clouds low, air thick with spring. A charter bus idled outside of McAllister High while a crowd gathered inside the gymnasium. No cameras, no network logos, just rows of students in folding chairs and the squeak of sneakers echoing across polished floors. Jasmine Crockett stood near the free throw line, microphone in hand. No red carpet, no suit, just jeans, flats, and a navy blazer that didn't need shoulder pads to carry weight. She'd been invited to talk about leadership, policy, whatever they wanted, but most of the room just wanted to talk about the night before. A girl in the second row raised her hand. 8th grade, bright pink notebook clutched to her chest. "How'd you stay that calm?" she asked. "Like, when he was doing all that?" The room got quiet, not dramatic, just curious, waiting. Jasmine didn't speak right away. She looked at the girl, then past her, at the whole room. Then she said, "Because I wasn't there to win." A pause. "I was there to remind him who's really listening." And just like that, the tension dissolved. Not into cheers or shouts or applause, just that rare kind of quiet where you know something important has just been said. She went on to talk about purpose, about policy, about finding your voice, even when people try to label it first. But the students weren't scribbling down bullet points. They were watching her, listening, not because they had to, because they wanted to. When it was over, the applause wasn't loud, it was steady. And as Jasmine stepped off the court, a teacher whispered, "You know, that wasn't a speech, that was a shift." And she was right, because what started as a segment for ratings had become something else. Not just a viral moment, not just a takedown, a mirror, and a reminder. That power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it sits still and changes everything. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.